My name is Dana Keene, and I'm 33 years old. I've worked at Vectra Systems for almost 4 years now, long enough to know that silence keeps you safe, but truth keeps you sane. I've tried to balance the two. Though lately, the line has blurred. That morning, Seattle looked like it was painted in gray watercolor. The streets glistened with leftover rain, and the hum of traffic rose faintly through the 23rd floor windows. I arrived early, craving the quiet before the day began, the kind where I could sip my coffee and review deployment logs without interruption. I didn't make it past my inbox. There it was, sitting like a small bomb between system reports and client updates. Subject mandatory HR meeting 11:00 a.m. No context, no greeting. Just a calendar link and a single sentence. Please confirm your attendance. For a moment, I couldn't feel my fingers. Yesterday's meeting replayed in my mind, the one where I'd questioned a segment of the North Bank financial rollout. We're missing redundancy validation, I'd said, calm and factual. Bryce Linton, my new manager, had smiled at me the way some people smile right before they lock a door. We'll discuss that offline, he'd replied, voice smooth as ice. Now, the timing wasn't hard to read. I leaned back in my chair, the leather cold against my palms, and watched raindrops race each other down the glass wall beside me. Outside, the Space Needle pierced the low clouds like a warning. I tried to convince myself that maybe HR just wanted clarification. Maybe it wasn't retaliation. But I'd seen this pattern before: the polite email, the quick check-in, the way a reputation could be quietly folded and filed away. Across the office, people trickled in, laughing softly, shaking off umbrellas. The world kept spinning while my screen glowed with that one line demanding my presence. I clicked accept on the meeting invite, heart hammering, and straightened my notes for the morning. Bryce would be in soon, and whatever this meeting was, it had already begun. I'm 33, and if there's one thing I've learned in every tech company I've worked for, it's that power always arrives wearing a smile. Bryce Linton's smile was flawless, every tooth a promise, every word a calculation. He joined Vectra a month ago. Fresh from a competitor we used to envy, the executive memo called him a strategic leader with cross-functional expertise. What it meant, in practice, was that he'd never written a line of code but spoke like he'd invented the internet. Our first team meeting after his arrival set the tone. Bryce stood at the front of the glass-walled conference room, hands clasped loosely, radiating composure. We'll be restructuring how we communicate, he said. Fewer group discussions, more direct reporting through me. Respect flows upward. The phrase clung to the room like humidity. Around the table, heads nodded polite, obedient, terrified. Vectra had always been competitive, but under Bryce, it became theatrical. Everything was presentation slides, catchphrases, and perfectly timed smiles for upper management. The work itself, the architecture, the testing, the risks faded into background noise. I did my best to stay steady, to keep my focus on the actual systems. But the shift was immediate. Questions in meetings were negativity. Suggestions were tone issues. I learned to measure every word before speaking. Carmen Doyle from HR stopped by our floor more often now. She was always cordial, with that gentle, unblinking tone HR professionals master. "How's the transition going?" she asked one afternoon, hand on my chair. Her perfume was light, clean, and vaguely suffocating. "Smooth," I said. It wasn't worth the truth. Later that day, my friend Lena Patel dropped by my cubicle, eyes wary. "Start documenting everything," she whispered. "Timestamps, meeting notes, even hallway conversations. If Bryce decides you're a problem, you'll need proof he existed first." I nodded, though I wasn't sure what to document anymore, the facts or the slow distortion of them. The next morning, Bryce called for a full team sync about North Bank's deployment schedule. I opened a new page in my notebook and wrote the date at the top. Something in me knew I'd need it. I'm 33, and I've never been afraid of data. People. Yes, especially people with power, but not data. Numbers don't lie. They just sit there, waiting for someone brave enough to read them out loud. The North Bank Financial Review was set for 9 sharp. By 8:55, the conference room was already full. Developers, analysts, project coordinators, even a few executives eager to witness Bryce Linton's first big client presentation. The screen glowed with his signature slides, perfect gradients, rising graphs, not a red mark in sight. "Vectra's ready," Bryce announced, his voice confident and warm. "We're at 100% deployment readiness." I stared at the report in front of me. The numbers didn't match what I'd seen in the system logs last night. The load balancing module still failed under high-volume tests. The redundancy layer hadn't cleared the 4T-odd validation. My pulse started to climb. When he opened the floor for questions, I waited for someone else to speak. No one did. "Bryce," I began, keeping my tone even, "before we move to rollout, we may need another validation cycle. The redundancy script's still erroring past 3.8 terabytes. A small shift rippled through the room, paper rustling. Eyes flicking up from laptops. Bryce's smile didn't waver, but his jaw tensed. "That's already been resolved, Dana. Let's not alarm the room with hypothetical risks." "It's not hypothetical," I said gently. "If we go live now, we could compromise data integrity for client accounts." The silence that followed was the kind that hums. Bryce looked at me, eyes narrowing just enough to register warning. "We'll discuss this offline." And just like that, the meeting moved on. Applause came when he closed his laptop soft, automatic, as people filed out. He didn't look at me once, but his smile, faint and deliberate, lingered like a threat. I closed my folder, every instinct telling me something invisible had just shifted. I'm 33, and I used to think hard work spoke for itself. Now, I understand silence can speak louder. The week after the North Bank meeting, my inbox went quiet. My name vanished from project threads I'd started. Invitations to test reviews skipped me entirely. The daily status call that had once included half the engineering floor was suddenly restricted to leadership. Bryce had begun tightening the circle, and I was outside it. The air at Vectra changed. 2. Conversations cut short when I walked into the break room. The developers I'd mentored found excuses to stay buried in code. It wasn't cruelty, just survival. No one wanted to be caught on the wrong side of Bryce's favor. Only Lena dared to speak openly. One afternoon, she pulled me into a conference room, closing the door behind her. "He's building a paper trail," she said quietly. "Reframing that meeting as insubordination. He's setting you up." I stared at the wall calendar behind her. The North Bank rollout date had been circled in red. "So what do I do?" "Document everything," she whispered. "Every email, every ignored warning. He's good at stories. You'll need facts." That night, I couldn't sleep. Rain lashed the windows of my apartment, and my laptop screen glowed in the dark. I scrolled through Vectra's website, our slogan pulsing at the top, "Where transparency meets innovation." The words felt like a joke I was too slow to get. At 7:42 a.m. the next morning, an email from HR appeared in my inbox. Subject meeting reminder, topic professional conduct. From Carmen Doyle. Time 11:00 a.m. My breath caught. The timing, the wording, it wasn't subtle. I called Marjorie, a college friend who worked in HR for another firm. Her tone turned flat as I explained. "Bring your documentation," she said. "Don't sign anything. HR's job isn't to protect you, it's to protect them." I stared at the phone long after the call ended. My reflection ghosted in the black screen. I'm 33, and I've sat through hundreds of meetings in my career, but none where my own name felt like evidence. The HR conference room was smaller than I expected, airless, with blinds drawn halfway to block the skyline. The table was spotless, except for a neat folder in front of Bryce and a glass of water sweating slowly beside Carmen Doyle. "Dana," she began, voice smooth as polished glass. "Your recent comment during the North Bank meeting has been perceived as inappropriate and undermining leadership. I sat straighter, forcing my hands to stay still on my lap. Inappropriate how Bryce answered before she could. Publicly questioning my decisions damages team morale, he said, his smile professional, his eyes triumphant. I slid a small folder across the table printed reports, timestamps, the same warnings I'd submitted 3 weeks earlier. These were sent through the proper channels. I spoke up only when the risk was ignored. Carmen barely glanced at the pages. This isn't about the data, she said evenly. It's about communication style. The phrase hit me like a door closing. I wanted to argue, to tell them style didn't corrupt databases, decisions did, but something in Carmen's tone warned me the verdict had already been written. Her fingers tapped the table once, signaling an invisible rhythm of control. Bryce leaned back, confident, the corner of his folder peeking open my performance notes, highlighted in red. "We're not here to punish," he added softly. "Just to help you realign." Realign? The word made my throat tighten. Carmen's smile returned, calm and final. "We'll be drafting a brief performance plan for you to review." I nodded, pretending to take notes, my pen pressing hard enough to tear the page. The knock at the door came just then, sharp, unexpected. Carmen's head snapped toward it. Annoyed. "We're in a private meeting," she called out. The handle turned anyway. I'm 33, and I've learned that silence can wound just as deeply as words. But in that room, the silence broke first. The knock came 2 quick raps. Then the door swung open before Carmen could answer. Elias Grant, Vectra's CEO, stepped inside. The air shifted immediately, as if the oxygen itself recognized authority. He wasn't what I expected from a man who ran a multi-million-dollar firm. No entourage, no preamble, just a calm gaze that swept the table, taking in every detail my open folder of reports. Bryce's stiff posture, Carmen's frozen smile. "I hope I'm not intruding," he said mildly, closing the door behind him. Carmen nearly tipped her water glass as she rose. "Mr. Grant, of course not. We were just conducting a routine meeting." "Good," Elias replied, pulling out the chair beside mine. "I'd like to hear it." Bryce's color drained. He managed a nod, his fingers tightening around his pen. Elias looked at me directly. "I understand this is about a comment you made in the North Bank meeting. Let's start there." The room went still. My pulse thudded in my ears. Slowly. I explained what I'd found in the system tests, the redundancy errors, the risks to client data. I laid out each fact carefully, my voice steadier than my hands. Elias listened without interrupting, asking precise questions about data thresholds and testing protocols. His understanding of the details surprised me. When he turned to Bryce, his tone remained polite but sharp. "So," he said, "you reviewed these concerns." Bryce cleared his throat. "We've implemented comparable solutions before. Her risk projections were overstated." Elias nodded once. "Interesting." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. "North Bank's CIO called me last night. Their audit found the same vulnerability Dana flagged. So perhaps we're discussing the wrong problem here." Carmen's smile vanished. Bryce stared at the table. The clock on the wall ticked, impossibly loud. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without restraint. I'm 33, and I've spent most of my career trying to sound smaller than what I know. But in that moment, I didn't need to. Elias Grant leaned back in his chair, calm and deliberate. His voice was even, but every word landed like a verdict. "Let's review this carefully," he said, flipping through the folder Bryce had brought. "These are the weekly updates you sent to the executive board." Bryce nodded. Too quickly. "Yes, sir." "All verified by our architecture leads." Elias traced a finger along the page. "Except this line," he said quietly. "It states the redundancy validation passed final review last week. According to the internal log, no such review occurred." "So who verified this?" Bryce's throat worked before sound came out. "We were managing optics for the client." He stammered. We planned to run the final checks before launch. Optics don't secure systems, Elias said, his tone still calm but unmistakably final. Carmen looked down at her notes, pretending to read. The room's power balance had inverted completely. Elias turned to me. Dana, how long have you been with Vectra? 4 years next month? And in that time, he continued, how often have you found process flaws like this one? I hesitated, feeling Bryce's glare at the edge of my vision. Too often, I said finally. Elias nodded, thoughtful. Then it seems we've been addressing the wrong problem. You tried to discipline the one person who did her job. Bryce's pen snapped between his fingers. With respect, sir. There were communication issues. There were leadership issues. Elias cut in. Voice still level. And those end today. He closed the folder and looked back at me. I think we need to discuss your future here, but in a different context. Carmen and Bryce exchanged a look, realizing whatever this meeting had been meant to accomplish had just slipped out of their control. I'm 33, and I've never been inside the CEO's office before. By late afternoon, the adrenaline from that morning's confrontation had faded, leaving behind a strange, suspended quiet. When the message from Elias's assistant appeared on my screen, "Please come up at 4, I reread it twice. The elevator ride felt longer than usual, every floor passing with a muted chime. Elias's office occupied the top corner of the building, walls of glass framing the gray shimmer of Puget Sound. The room was minimalist: one desk, 2 chairs, and a single fern that looked too alive for corporate air. He stood by the window when I entered. Sit down, Dana. His tone was steady, almost conversational, but the weight of it made me straighten in my chair. I've spent the afternoon reviewing our internal procedures, he began. We have talented people here, but too many decisions are filtered through politics instead of data. He turned toward me. That ends now. We're forming a new division: technical oversight, independent, objective. I nodded slowly, unsure where he was leading. I'd like you to lead it. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Why me? The question slipped out before I could stop it. Because you cared enough to be inconvenient, he said. Without hesitation, something tightened in my chest, part disbelief, part fear. Leadership meant walking the same corridors that had just tried to bury me. If I take this on, I said carefully, I'll need the authority to act, not just a title. Elias's mouth curved slightly. That's why it reports directly to me. Outside, the sun had begun to dip, streaking the sound with silver. I realized my hands were trembling. I folded them on my lap, willing my voice steady. Then I'll do it. He nodded once. Good. Let's make this place worthy of its slogans. I walked out of his office into the dim hallway, the world below glowing with city light, and knew nothing about my job would ever be the same again. I'm 33, and I used to think leadership was about volume: who spoke the loudest, who filled the room first. I was wrong. Real leadership, I was learning, started in silence, listening before anyone dared to speak. 3 weeks after that meeting in HR, I sat at the head of a smaller, repurposed conference room with a sign on the door that read Technical Oversight Division. The title still felt too big. Like shoes I hadn't grown into, my new team, 4 engineers and 2 project leads, sat scattered around the table, each wearing the same guarded look. They weren't hostile, just cautious. They'd seen what happened to people who raised concerns. I started simple. This room, I said, is where we tell the truth about our systems without punishment. A few glances exchanged. Then, slowly, one of the engineers, May, spoke up about a recent API integration that had skipped validation. It was a small detail until we dug into it. Within 2 days, we discovered a chain reaction that would have caused a cascading system failure during the next client update. Millions in damage? Avoided. Word spread faster than I expected. Suddenly, the same developers who once averted their eyes in the break room were forwarding my findings to their departments. A few even stopped by my office to ask for input before finalizing reports. Bryce submitted his resignation 2 weeks later, citing a new opportunity in strategic consulting. His farewell email was brief and copied to everyone except me. Carmen from HR grew quieter around me, her smiles smaller, her words slower. One afternoon, she stopped by my desk with a draft of a revised employee escalation policy. "Could you review this?" she asked. For clarity. Her tone wasn't friendly, but it was respectful. That was enough. That evening, rain misted against the windows, and the lights from the waterfront blurred across the glass. I sat at my desk, drafting my first oversight report for Elias Concise. Transparent, unflinching. It detailed the progress we'd made, the vulnerabilities uncovered, and what still needed repair not just in code, but in culture, for the first time in months. I hit send without hesitation. I'm 33, and I still feel my pulse quicken before I speak to a room. But this time, it isn't fear, it's focus. 3 months had passed since Elias handed me the chance to rebuild something worth believing in. Today, the entire company crowded into the main auditorium for a town hall titled The Cost of Silence. My name was printed beneath the title on the digital banner. It still didn't feel real. I stepped up to the podium, my palms warm against the wood, and looked out at the rows of faces: engineers, managers, interns. The same people who once whispered behind closed doors now waited, attentive and still. "I'm not here to talk about one mistake," I began. "I'm here to talk about what happens when we treat truth like a threat." The lights dimmed slightly as the presentation started behind me: graphs, system models, examples of near misses. But I kept my focus on the human side, the small decisions that led to silence, the emails unanswered, the warnings dismissed. I didn't name anyone. I didn't need to. For months, I said. We called it professionalism when we stayed quiet. But professionalism without courage is just fear in a suit. The room stayed quiet, not tense, but thoughtful. I could see it in their faces, recognition, not defensiveness. When I finished, the applause came slowly at first, then gathered strength until it filled the hall. It didn't sound like celebration. It sounded like release. Later, by the elevator, Lena caught up to me, grinning. "I still can't believe HR once called you in for being disrespectful." I laughed softly, the sound surprising even me. Maybe that's what respect looks like when it's aimed in the right direction. We said goodbye, and I lingered by the window as rain washed down the glass. The city lights blurred into silver and gold streaks against the dark. My reflection looked back at me steadier now, no longer afraid of her own voice. The same woman who once trembled outside HR now built the system she wished had existed, and, for the first time, the silence around me felt earned.